Hello and welcome to 6.1 Lab 6. We're going to dive in. Go ahead and open up this file and the accompanying JS file in your Visual Studio, whatever editor you're going to use. And what we're going to do is, prior to this particular lab, we've been interacting with the end user a lot using the prompt. Now, in reality, in a production environment, you don't do that too often. Because prompts can be annoying and you can't guarantee what type of information you're going to get when you ask for a number and all that stuff. And so a lot of times in a web application you get information from the end user using a form. So we're going to work with forms and see how can we use forms. There's various ways you can use forms. So I'm going to show you some ways that you can take a form, and in this case we're going to have 4 fields and a submit button, and how we can call JavaScript and work with our from a function and work with our forms and things. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to have a form with 4 input fields for address, city, state, zip, and then we're going to grab that information and output it back to the screen. So if I do, here for example on our form, if I do like 1000 West Campus Drive, Wausau, Wisconsin 54401, hit enter, and then it put it on the page for us. So let's see how we did that. Now, before I dive into that and show you the HTML and things like that, probably in reality we're just working with input text boxes, but if I were doing this in production I would put some things like maybe my state would be a drop down so I could control what the end user selected rather than WI. This allows them to put in WIS, WISC or whatever, or spell out Wisconsin. If I want to limit what they do, which is important to do some of that data validation and putting HTML constraints and things like that, I just wanted to throw that out there that may be something you might want to look at as you're dealing with forms. But let's switch over. Let's look at first the HTML. So here, right after, and I've got the add your form after this comment here. So I have a form and my ID, I ID'd it with an address form, and my action here is just I'm submitting to the same page with a pound sign that tells me I'm not going to another page. And then I'm doing an on submit return. If you looked at the information prior to this lab, that's how it tells you, okay, I'm going to return to this page. I'm not going to get rid of anything, and I want to run the format address function. And then down at the bottom, we're running it on submit. Down at the bottom is where we actually have our submit. So when they click on that, they run the submit format address. Okay. Now the labels are simply that, just labels. So like here I have my address label. It's for my address field, just text on the screen. Otherwise we'd just have fields and would know what they're for. And then we're using input tags. Input tag is the main tag you use in forms, and here I'm just taking input for, and there's different types of input tags. These are just text tags. If I could change to input type password and things like that. So for right now I'm just doing input, and I do an ID and name for each one for input tags for my address, city, state, and zip on the screen. Now, where the magic really happens is right here is that format address function. So when I click submit, that on submit event gets triggered and says, okay, run format address, return here. So here, format address, I have several variables. I have an output, form, address, city, state, and zip. So first I'm going to grab my output div. So just like we've done before, go into my document, get my element with the ID of output div, which if I go back to my HTML is right here, right below my form there. And then I say go into my document, get my element with the ID of address form. So that is my address form here. So I'm grabbing this entire form and stuffing it inside my form variable, which allows me to do things like this. In my address, make that equal to my form variable dot address dot value. So go into my form object that I stored in my form variable, go into the address field, and get me the value for that. I do the same thing with city, state, and zip. Then what that allows me to do is work with those 4 variables, where I can do an output.innerHTML of address, city, state, and zip, and put in whatever formatting I want so that I can get my address like that. Now, one of the key things here is this return false. That's doesn't refresh your page. That helps with that refreshing. So if you notice my page didn't refresh, if I remove that, let me just comment it out. show you what happens here. Let me refresh my page and go to 1000 West Campus Drive, Wausau, Wisconsin 54401. And if I click enter, okay, see what it did was you saw it there for a split second, but then it refreshed my page. By doing this return false, that keeps the page from being refreshed, and so that it just updates the page itself. Okay, so that's a way you can actually do like a self-submitting form that calls a function. There are several ways to do it. This is probably the first step in learning how that works. But there's like validation you can do and all sorts of stuff you can do with your JavaScript by grabbing these individual fields and things, but we'll say that for a later date. But play with this. Make sure you can build a form that submits just like we did in our lab, and because you'll be using that in a future assignment. And if you have any questions, let me know, and happy coding.